Oh my God, it canceled my fucking things. Streamlabs, you really fucked me this week, you fucking piece of shit. Oh well.
Good evening, everybody. Can someone wave their hand if they can hear my voice?
Good evening. Yep,
Thanks,
I can hear you.
Okay, I have 6 o'clock. We still have people coming into the room, so we're going to give it a few minutes before we get started. Okay, hello everybody. This is Brian Behringer. I am the session leader for the Memphis Scipreneur Challenge educational programming. Most of us met and talked last week about this, and so I'm really happy to have all y'all here today. Erica and Ryan and Shelby are online as well. They're going to stay on mute probably most of the time unless there's questions directed to them, but Shelby's going to help me field your questions as we move along over the next hour and a half. We have a lot to talk about tonight, so let's get through a few things first. Does everybody see the screen, Memphis Scipreneur Challenge 2021? You should, if it's not pinned to your screen, so where it's all the way big, you should pin that to your screen so it stays big. Rohan, is that looking pinned to your screen there? Yeah, good. You're at the top left of my video gallery, so I'm going to refer to you a lot, maybe to sort of double check, so I appreciate it. You're the first face I see otherwise. So that's good, and everybody can hear my voice because Rohan's responding back to me and everything else, so that's good too. And we'll just kind of move forward with this week's information because, like I said, it's a lot, so we're going to move through it rather quickly. As with last week, if you have questions, put those into the chat. Chat those to everyone so we all see it. There will be a download of the chat so we can respond to those questions offline if we don't get to them today. Also, there's the same streaming as it was last time. So these sessions are going to be streamed on Facebook on our page, as well as on YouTube on our page. So you can refer back to these at any time in case you missed anything or had to disconnect from Zoom for whatever reason. Or if someone's not here moving forward, you can always ask them to go visit the class session so they know what's going on and can talk informatively about what you're working on between each week's sessions. So without further ado, I'm going to get started. There's only one thing that I just realized I messed up on. I didn't change the date and the time for the office hours down the bottom hand corner. We'll announce those at the end when they are actually going to be, but I'll do it right now too. They're going to be tomorrow between 4 and 6 will be available for anybody to talk. Shelby's going to send out a spreadsheet to sign up. And if you want to talk with any Shelby or I about what this week's session was, all you do is sign up for a session and then we'll get on Zoom at that time and talk with you and your team. Okay, looking at the right, here's our agenda for the day. We're going to go over here again. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. The week agenda, we're going to start going off with just some entrepreneurship basics. I think it's a good way to start is to kind of set the stage of what an entrepreneur is. Many of you probably know the definition of that, probably know an entrepreneur or two, or I should say you definitely know one, whether they know they're an entrepreneur or not, but you have someone in your life that you know is an entrepreneur. They have their own businesses, or maybe even they desire to have their own businesses or had one in the past and will have some in the future. But I think everyone in this group here probably knows what we're going to talk about when we try to identify what an entrepreneurship is. We're going to talk about design thinking. I think it's a very important precursor to the rest of the information that we're going to discuss during the sessions is understanding how to be creative. And that's a big part of what I teach in our curriculum. The third part, we're going to go over the idea discovery canvas, which is the tool that we're going to utilize throughout the sessions. It's going to allow us to break down each component of information in order to put together a narrative and a pitch to pitch this at the end of the session that we're doing or the end of the programming. But also this is for you to utilize throughout your life when you're trying to understand and vet out the viability of an idea. So the idea discovery canvas, which is created by the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation at Christian Brothers University. The last part for this first set column here will be market identification. We're going to talk about customers, consumers, market identification, what a total addressable market is, what a serviceable addressable market is, what an operatable market is. So we'll go through those. The fifth thing is probably the most important thing for tonight. That's problem framing. Our homework is going to be based off of the problem statement. So we're going to talk about that tonight. And then we'll do a brief dive into the pitch deck. Just an overview. I want to go ahead and give you exposure of that because that's what you'll be utilizing by the end of the programming to pitch at the final session in front of our panelists. And then we'll go over homework real quick. Okay, so are you an entrepreneur? I mean, it's easy for me to answer the question because I know the definition. I know what it feels like to be an entrepreneur, and I've been doing that for 30 years since I was in my early teens with family businesses and a variety of other just hustles that I got myself into over the years. So, I mean, I know what an entrepreneur is, but I think probably I was saying earlier is every one of y'all has an entrepreneur in your life, and maybe you've been an entrepreneur or you desire to be that. Maybe it's a father, mother, brother, sister, cousin, aunt, uncle. It doesn't matter. You know someone or a best friend, or you happen to go and become friends with someone of a restaurant that you like to patronage. So you understand what it's like to at least know what an entrepreneur looks like and kind of thinks like. So an entrepreneur is by many definition is just someone who is willing to take a leap of faith, right? Someone who's willing to take an idea that is completely unvetted, unbaked, and jump off that proverbial cliff into the unknown to try to figure out what's going on. I think personally, anybody can be an entrepreneur, both with and I'll just a couple of side examples, but both of the government shutdowns over the last several years, the number of entrepreneurs that were laid off because of their jobs being lost skyrocketed. There was hundreds and hundreds of new businesses being launched by government employees that are no longer working in those jobs, and they launched their own businesses. So a lot of times entrepreneurs come out of necessity, and a lot of times they come out of opportunity. But all the times entrepreneurs make opportunity out of necessity, right? They go out and find the ways to to build something unique and valuable to customers and to other people. So there's lots of reasons why you might become an entrepreneur. Maybe you've been working in a business for a long time and you're ready to take that leap. You're okay with leaving the stability. Maybe you have a spouse that allows you to do that. Maybe you're financially wealthy and you can just, throw all your money at it and just, do anything you want. There's lots of different reasons to be an entrepreneur. What I would like to talk to you about is the considerations of an entrepreneur. And when you're going down this kind of understanding of what it takes to be an entrepreneur, it's not for the faint of heart. If you want to, I always say that if you want to work 40 hours a week, then, get a job at FedEx or AutoZone or any one of the jobs in town. And it's going to be a great life, right? But if you want to work any hours that you want and set your own schedule, then entrepreneurship is a great way of doing that. But just know, I've always said that I prefer to work 80 hours so I don't have to work 40 hours, right? I don't mind working 80 to 100 hours all day long and everything. And I have a family of entrepreneurs, so we all kind of are in the same way and same mentality in this household. But that's so I don't have to go work at jobs that I just don't feel like my value of what I like on a daily basis is being received. So, one of those things that you have to contemplate is, do you have the ability to do that, and is it the right time? So, and do you have the personality? A lot of people look at entrepreneurs and they say they're extroverts and they, that they're very energetic and motivated and this, that, and the other. And that's not true. Actually, a large percentage of entrepreneurs are not extroverted. They might fall close to the extroversion line on the Myers-Briggs scale, but doesn't mean they're all the way on the other side of the spectrum, completely extroverted, can talk to anybody. The guy who talks to the wall, which is me, basically, the guy who strikes up conversations in the elevator, the guy who strikes up conversation in the line. Sorry, that's me. So if you see me, we'll probably have a conversation. But, I'm an extrovert, but I know plenty of entrepreneurs that are not. Some are very, very gifted. So it's not about your personality as it relates to being extroverted or introverted. It's more about, understanding how to come out of your shell, right? Motivation. You have to be very self-motivated because there's no one going to be behind you, patting your back saying, keep going, keep going, keep going. So you have to be very, very self-motivated. I like to think of things in ROI, but this is something else, but ROE, right? You need to understand what your expectation is return on your energy. How much energy you're going to put into this, how much effort you're going to put into this, and what is that ROE? What do you expect to get back from that energy that you put forth? Work-life balance. I mean, if I didn't have a household of entrepreneurs, we wouldn't understand each other at all. It's one of those things where because we have an understanding, we're able to kind of dictate our work-life balance. But if you're in a family with a bunch of people, but that aren't entrepreneurs, you're gonna have to understand that you have to figure out how to do work-life balance. And that goes with family and finances as well. And I'm not a big proponent of you taking your 401 and going to put it into a new business or anything like that. It's more about understanding the ins and outs of your finances and what you can and can't do as you're getting early starting into an idea and validating that idea, and certainly understanding what work-life balance is. Perseverance and energy. I mean, entrepreneurs, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to look at obstacles as something that you can physically get through. If more, I should say figuratively get through in most cases, but a lot of times it is physically get through or literally get through. Entrepreneurs generally look at obstacles as something to overcome, over, around, under, or through. We don't stop at roadblocks. And there's a saying that we have at StartCo when we were there, and Shelby and probably said these words 1,000 times, but never stop, right? That was the motto of most of the entrepreneurs coming out of the program, is to never stop. Empathetic tendencies. You have to understand, we'll talk about it tonight, the difference between empathy and sympathy, and understanding what native bias is. Everyone in this room has native biases. We have tendencies, we have things that we, based on life events or just personality traits that we let act as biases, both good and bad, towards something. And those lead to generally assumptions from other people's perspective. So having empathetic tendencies, not sympathetic, empathetic tendencies, and understanding perspective will allow you to get past your own native bias in order to not make assumptions, or maybe even write the assumptions, but go challenge yourself on those assumptions to get to a point where your idea is actually something that's validated by other people's perspective. And that's a critical point, right? If you're building a solution for one, you're building a solution for no one. If you're building a solution for everyone, guess what? You're also building a solution for no one. right? So you have to understand the empathy of your target market and your target customers to understand what their drivers are, their motivations and their triggers. And you can't do that if you're not empathetic. And empathy can also be something that can be taught. Analytical never hurts. I have a group here full of analysts, I'm sure, breaking down the data, breaking down the components, going to the kind of Henry Ford model of nothing's too difficult when broken down into small enough chunks. That's what you got to do. You have to be very analytical. You got to look at the data. You got to look at all the attributes that both positively and negatively affect something that you're working on, what's downstream, what's upstream, so on and so forth. So very, very analytical, very willing to break things down into small little components. And then the three C's, this is what I look for in every entrepreneur that I work with and every entrepreneur that I train and coach is character, confidence, and coachability. Character is who you are when no one's looking, right? It's your innate personality that maybe not a lot of people get to see sometimes, but your actions speak louder than the words in that regard. So that's your character. Confidence, it's that borderline between being cocky and arrogant and just being confident. And confidence comes from knowledge. Knowledge is about information. Information is about data and insights, understanding your product back and forth, understanding your market back and forth, understanding your funding sources back and forth will allow you to have a lot of confidence about what you're talking about. By the end of this program in 8 more weeks, when we're doing pitches, I hope everyone's confidence is so high because we've gone through this process and you've learned more about your product to the point where you can defend that product to anybody you talk to in a very confident fashion. And then the last thing is coachability. There's not a single thing um, or a single day that I don't go by where I feel like if I needed to learn something that I didn't, right? If I want to go learn something, I go look, I research, and I teach myself, or I ask someone who's more experienced than myself to teach me, to mentor me. I have dozens of mentors that have been mentoring me over the last 3 decades, and I still talk to a large percentage of them. And then I'm also a mentor to dozens and dozens of other individuals as well. And that's all about coachability. So understanding that you don't know everything, understanding that there's things to learn about yourself, about your business, about your technology, and about your clients, right? And there's 1,000 other things, but those are the tops, right? So coachability is a very important thing. So these are the considerations and character traits that an entrepreneur generally would have. Some of the skills, we'll go through these rather quickly. Obviously, critical problem solving. We talked about empathy, empathetic research. This is a big one on the right here, user-centered ideation or user-centered design, human-centered design. We're going to touch on that tonight. Risk mitigation on a daily basis, understanding what risk will come, what risks you need to be aware of, even the unknown unknowns, right? So trying to understand how to mitigate risk on a daily basis is a big part of what an entrepreneur does. Conceptualization, we're going to talk about that through these sessions. The ability to take an idea from a napkin and put it into a form that someone can actually even potentially touch, work with, feel, give you feedback for. But essentially, we're talking about even figuratively conceptualizing in your mind an idea based on information, right? And that's what we're talking about. Strategic planning, of course, monetization, understanding how to take something that is worth nothing to anyone except for yourself because it's your own intellectual property and saying, I want to make sure that the value proposition for this product that I'm building has the ability to make money. That's what monetization is, but it's only or it's at the mercy of someone paying you. And we're going to talk about customers and consumers tonight as well. So monetization is all about taking something that's been conceptualized and making sure it's in a form that someone's going to pay you for. Startup funding and financing, the ability to understand how money works in a business is also a big part. And then something that we're going to be teaching, not in this class, but in other classes, that's important for entrepreneur skills that I'm adding now and starting to teach is sustainability, understanding how your product and your company and your team, your employees, your industry, your sector, whatever you can breed in sustainability to your environment. And that's a very important thing as well. So a lot of entrepreneurs are moving into the sustainability world as well. Okay, so are you creative? I mean, I found this picture today, and I think I have a picture very similar to this of me wearing a helmet with a lot of electronics on it, mostly taken off the walls of my father's garage and put onto a helmet. I mean, literally. So it was pretty, it was like, are you creative? I mean, yeah, I think I've been a fairly creative person my whole life, but the thing that was found most interesting is 4 or 5 years ago when I started getting into design thinking and teaching that, I realized that yes, I was creative because I was highly imaginative, right? And I needed something to tangibly manifest what was in my head. So I'd build things, and so, and as I showed you last week, I'm still into building things because Legos is my big hobby, right? So I still build things and make things and everything else. So I've always been creative. And then 4 or 5 years ago, when I started learning about design thinking, like I was saying, I realized I was lucky, but other people aren't so lucky. But the fact is they can be taught how to be creative, right? It's actually fairly simple to do. And we're going to go through a little bit of it tonight. And I hope to challenge some of y'all that feel like you're not creative to not think it's all about being artistic on a piece of paper or with a paint with a paintbrush or glue or Legos, right? I mean, it's anything that you can think of. That doesn't mean it's just because you can't build something that you're not creative. All right. So we're going to talk about creative from a thinking perspective. So creative is not bound by any single definition. We just talked about that. We can each express our own meaning of creativity as we describe what we experience when we new ideas are formed, right? So creativity can be anything as it relates to understanding that something doesn't exist and we need to make it into a form where people would buy that. Well, that takes a lot of creativity to get from that nothing, that napkin, that piece of paper, all the way to something where it's in somebody's hands or it's in someone's body or it's on someone's head, right? And working with the babies and the formation of their skulls. These products and everything we're talking about, they have to go through a very lengthy creative process to come from nothing to get to something. And so creativity is not bound by a single definition of I can draw, I can paint, I can sculpt, I can mold, I can do things like that. Creativity is defined by things that are just innovative, things that we have to think about in order to get from point A to point B, right? We're creative every day. Challenging yourself to go a different way to work or having to go a different way to work is the basic example of being creative. In fact, that is, if I can get back to my deck here, that's what we're going to talk about here in a second. Big creativity, big creative, and small creative. So creativity denotes a person's capacity to produce new or original ideas, insights, inventions, or artistic products, which are accepted by experts as being scientific, aesthetic, social, or technical value. It's kind of a wordy definition, but to me, it opens up a lot of different facets of how you can think about creativity. So let's talk about the two forms of creativity. There's the little c. That's the one we were talking about today, just a minute ago, taking a different way to work, going to a different place that you've never been before and trying to figure it out, changing your wardrobe, changing your diet, small product updates, and in the app that you love on your phone. These are all small c kind of creative type things. They happen on a daily basis. They're very routine. You barely notice many of them. They're garden variety, but they are someone being creative about something and changing something up. Some of those you will notice as you do product updates. And as you build out your businesses, you'll notice these things that are just kind of small C category type stuff. Then there's the big C, new and bold innovations that lead to disruptive ideas. And we use the word disruption in my industry as being a very positive word, right? We didn't want to disrupt an industry. We want to turn it on its head. So the processing power and miniaturization, I mean, batteries and CPUs, we've seen them get smaller and smaller and smaller over the last 4 decades, over the last 3 decades, especially over the last decade. And so there's all that stuff with miniaturization, batteries and cars. We have cars that are, and graphene, all these different things. These are major innovations that have disrupted many sectors. Alternative fuel will be something that will disrupt our entire planet and already has. Social media, I cannot give you any examples because I don't want to talk about social media. But the fact of the matter is starting in the 2010, 2008, whenever you first got on Facebook, and fast forward to 2021, and we've talked about elections and people being manipulated and everything else, social media disrupted our entire world. I mean, I can't think of a better example of a large C kind of creative thing, but that took a lot of creativity to get us there, right? It might not have gone to the direction we want, but the fact of the matter is that social media completely reinvented the way we interact with people. COVID, that's a big C that no one, I mean, hopefully no one created, but the fact of the matter is it's a big C that disrupted everything. Now think about the disruptions that are occurring because of COVID, right? Zoom technology. I don't have to train anybody in this room on how to use Zoom now. A year ago, there might have been a few, right? These are things that changes that occur over time, both naturally, organically, and by human means to change us in a very impactful and meaningful way, or a very large scale way. So thinking about creativity in these two levels will help you understand that you're being creative already just on a daily basis. Okay. So when we talk about breaking these things down, and I teach a whole semester on design thinking, so it's a 12 to 14 week class. I'm going to try to encapsulate into 15 minutes tonight. And we can talk about it more during office hours. I can talk about it more online, but design thinking is a process that has an industry standard. Companies like IDEO did a lot to build this theory around design thinking. And essentially, what it was a bunch of people similar to me that kind of challenge the norm and feel like people can be taught how to be creative. So if we know that or we feel that way, how do we build a solution or a process to do that? I think this one is one of the best ones because mostly it's simple, but it's just and it's easy to talk about. It's easy to kind of get your mind around. So the whole design thinking process is around understanding and empathizing around a problem with other individuals. So it's a problem that you're having, start to thinking and starting to think about it in other ways, starting to think about it in terms of, is it my problem because it's my doing, or is it my problem and other people are being affected by this problem as well? Opening your mind up and understanding other people's perspectives. They might have a similar problem, but the problem might manifest itself in a different way for them, or the effect of that problem might be manifested in a different way for them. So you have to understand, and we went back to this earlier of talking about empathy and understanding how to empathize with your customers to understand their perspective. At this point, we're not really saying, I want to try to figure this person out. Really, at this point, we're trying to understand what are all the parameters that would affect multiple groups of individuals, not just myself. So understanding and getting your head out of the box and understanding empathy and understanding how to look at other people's perspectives, which means you have to look deep into their motivations and the triggers that uh, cause them to make changes and make decisions. So you have to be empathetic. You have to think outside the box. You can't be a selfish person and be an entrepreneur. Trust me, it really will get in your way. Once you've kind of understand what the problem is and frame that problem, you start to define it better. You put parameters around it. You put boundaries about it. We're actually going to go through this tonight, and this will be part of your homework is actually defining the problem. But you have to be able to give a concise narration of what the problem is, the who, what's, when, whys, and wheres of what the problem is, why it occurs, when it occurs, who it occurs to, so on and so forth, to get a problem statement to start understanding what you have to create or ideate in order to build a solution. And that's what that next process is, the big light bulb in the middle. We're going to then take the information that we just gathered through being empathetic and doing empathetic research, defining a concise problem statement. And at this point, we start building a solution statement to go along with it. So we have a basic understanding of our customers. We have a good understanding of what our hypothesis is or our theory is around an idea or a problem. Then we start building the solution to that problem. And that's when we need to actually build at that point, moving on to the next step and doing prototyping. And then we do testing, right? And if you start to think about this, this is a little bit like the scientific method if you start thinking about it, right? And everybody in this group should know the scientific method. You know, you're going to observe, you're going to theorize, build hypothesis, build a test base, test that solution, analyze the data, manipulate the data into findings and insights, take those findings and insights that you just tested, turn those back around into updates to the original problem and solution based on information you find, build a new prototype or a new data set, test, 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 rinse and repeat, right? So this process is all about breaking these things down in a creative fashion in order to understand in a concise fashion what you need to do. Is this going to give you a company at the end of this process? No. Is it going to give you a viable product that you can go to the into the clinical trials with? No. Will it give you a good understanding of where you need to go to do that? Absolutely. And as you move into actually building out your minimum viable product, the product that you're going to launch first, you will continue to use design thinking to make it better and better and better. So design thinking, the idea discovery canvas that we're going to go over next, these are tools you'll continuously use throughout your life, I hope. But certainly on every entrepreneurial venture that you do or any kind of project that you build or help build from scratch, these are exceptionally good tools to help you define what needs to happen in order to solve a problem because you understand exactly what the problem is and you understand who it affects, why, when, and where. And that's a big part of design thinking. So I really encourage you to go online. IDEO is the company. It's a great, huge, big, massive design company around the world based out of New York. They have a great process for design thinking. Go to Google, go to wherever you want, ask Jeeves if that's still around, and do design thinking. I caught a couple people smiling on the Ask Jeeves thing. So that's laughing on the Ask Jeeves thing. So anyway, don't use Yahoo and stay away from Alta Vista. All right. So design thinking, look it up, read about it. It's good stuff. I'm going to go over a few more concepts tonight to kind of give you an understanding. So design thinking, the foundation of it is really quite simple. And that's why IDEO made it this. So there's 3 core activities. It's all about ideation based on inspiration and then implementation. And you see these kind of centrical, circles going around in kind of a positive fashion. They're all building upon each other. So ideation, comes from inspiration. Inspiration leads to prototyping and building things. And you implement that, rinse and repeat. Keep going, keep going, keep going. And ultimately, though, what you'll find out is your design thinking process looks like this, right? That is the early stages of the design thinking process, the time when you're in deep into discovery, which that word will be utilized quite a bit through this process. And you'll hear it time and time again from entrepreneurs. It's all about the discovery, right? It's all about the research, about finding. And when you're doing this and when you're working on technologies and when you're in your own educational process, you'll feel this way. You'll feel like everything is so chaotic, right? But that's a good thing. The more chaotic it is sometimes means the more things you have to actually quantify, qualify, compartmentalize, do whatever you need to do to come up with a viable design concept, right? So as it moves through this chaotic stage into the design stage, you build a problem statement, then it kind of starts to smooth out into delivery. Now, obviously, 3 months, 3 years after you deliver something, you're right back into the squirrely bit over here. And your customers are going to drive you into that squirrely bit over here on the left quicker than you actually think, because they're going to get satisfied with what you have, but then they're going to want more, right? So each product iteration that you do over time will get better and better and better, but understand that each part of those concepts or each part of those updates should or needs to, and I feel like is required to go through a design thinking process to make sure you're keeping to what the expectations of the customers are in the first place. And you aren't losing sight from where you came from. And you have sight or where you need to go to, right? So that's what this is all about, is taking chaos, making it sane, and then throwing it back into the world of chaos again. I like this graphic because it also gives a good understanding of what human-centered design is. Human-centered design is, and we've talked about in concept several times tonight, it's about understanding and being empathetic about your customer base, understanding their perspectives, understanding what they utilize to make decisions, and then building a solution that's centered around them, right? And it's centered around humans in that aspect. And I'm not saying you only build products for humans. You can build products for dogs, you can build products for things, but at that point, it'd be a dog-centered design, quite literally, or whatever you're building for it, you have to center on the user, right? The customer. And some things I've been changing it to user because of the example I just said. So I'll probably stop saying human and just go to thing or user. So anyway, innovation is the inflection point between desirability, feasibility, and viability. You can't build a solution if no one wants it. I mean, you can, but you're going to be wasting your time. You can't deliver a product to market if it's not feasible, and that feasibility comes from technology, comes from finances, money, comes from regulatory laws, ethics. So that feasibility, a product has to be able to be built in a feasible fashion in order to deliver a market. And then viability, that there's actually going to be an opportunity to sell that product and people will buy that product, and it's actually a viable solution that people want to utilize maybe once or maybe several times. And in that kind of inflection point between these 3, the Venn of that diagram, it's where the innovation meets, right? So that's really where innovation is housed, in between these 3 areas in human-centered design. All right, so we've talked about it a few times. I want to kind of go over it rather quickly and discuss what is empathy and what is sympathy. Most people have the ability to be sympathetic. Generally, that's when someone's saying something that's bothering them, and we say, that sucks, right? Look at the illustration down at the bottom. That's being sympathetic. That's being human enough to say, I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry, that you're going through that. It's not necessarily feeling it, but it's at least being of the personality to say you're sorry. That's important, but not as important as empathy. Empathy is understanding. Empathy is understanding the basis. Empathy is looking inside to someone and saying, I know why it's making you feel that way, or I believe I do, or I can associate with the reasons why you do. So empathy is about understanding people's feelings and then approaching them in a fashion that illustrates that understanding. So if you take these terms and you take the emotion out of it and the personality out of it, and you think of them as a business, or you think of them as a product, or you think of them as an idea, thinking in the same way, if you have a solution that really just kind of placates somebody, no one's going to use it for very long. But if you have something that truly responds to a fundamental need of someone because you understand their perspective and you're being empathetic, your product is going to sell. Your product is going to be utilized. And that's a big part of it. So, we talk in terms psychologically about these two things, but think of them also from a business perspective. The more you know, the better off you're going to be. The more you placate, the more you just say, yes, I think that sucks, but I'm not going to build you anything to fix that. Then, you're being a little too sympathetic and not enough empathy in that regard too. So empathy is a very important tool when being creative, because it allows you to see other people's perspective. Okay, before I go forward any further into the next topic, is there any questions about what we talked about today? Remember, this is a semester long course we teach in design thinking at CBU. So if you are interested in doing more of that, we can talk about other ways for you to get that level of education. And there's a lot of things online, a lot of things like Udemy and other LMS systems, learning management systems online that teach design thinking. So there's lots of resources out there, and we can talk about it more. But I wanted to go over it in a kind of nutshell fashion, because it kind of sets the stage of what an entrepreneur is and how they need to act in order to be successful. But I'm going to pause right there for a few minutes, give my voice a little break, and see if there's any questions that you might have. Just remember to come off mute if you do. Okay, my voice has now had its break and there's no questions. I'll move forward.
I have a quick question.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
So when you're talking about sort of the design thinking phase, there's a lot of, I guess in that picture of spending a lot of time on discovery versus design and delivery. Well, I guess from a scientist perspective, it definitely makes a lot of sense that you would spend a lot of time on the discovery side of things. But at the same time, it seems very inefficient from a business perspective, where I guess maybe that's not the most practical amount of time. Where I feel like while it's could be fun and interesting, maybe it's not the most efficient. I guess could you maybe speak a little bit towards that?
Kind of rephrase the question for me.
I guess how do you balance the complexity of the discovery phase with the time spent?
Yeah, that's a good question. Being creative.
I could probably speak to that, Brian. This is Brad online.
Okay.
I would say at Crossroads, which is a startup that came about in 2014 that I work for, they actually do it in parallel, right? And they're always in the discovery phase, which is what in R&D we call advanced development, which is pipelines for products that could become commercialized. And we're always in the discovery phase, but it's running parallel with the design phase of products that are going to be commercialized, that have a timeline associated with them and a product line and marketing and sales campaign that's tied to them. So it's I guess it's always ongoing, at least at Crossroads, but then you have parallel design that are going to commercialization.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good way of putting it from a established business perspective. But I think that's an important understanding of what I just said is when you have a large team and you can dedicate resources, the most successful companies that are building solutions have teams that are doing discovery full time, like we just said. That's their job, and their goal is to continuously continuously make their product and their solutions better by continuously understanding their customers and their customers' changing behaviors. Remember, if you put a product in the market, you're going to start changing that customer's expectations, that customer's behavior because of that product, because now it's solving a problem for them. So that problem's no longer there. What gets introduced with the solution? A higher expectation over time for products and services. So if you don't have anybody working in that on kind of a full-time basis, or at least a quarterly basis, then you will lose sight, and your feature roadmap will begin to deviate from the expectations of the customer, and you'll lose footing to competitors who are doing a better job of that than you are. When you're in the first stages like you are now, and I think that was also really an important part of your question that I was pulling out of, is you have to be creative. I mean, you have to understand that getting a product to market before it's ready to be at market is a bad thing. Getting a product to market based on the level of discovery that you need to have a good launch is the right thing. I'm not going to say it's a good thing, and I'm not going to say it's a bad thing, but it's certainly the right thing over the wrong thing as it relates to doing it prematurely. So you just got to understand that when you're in the early stages, um, good sayings are, first of all, don't sacrifice better for best, right? You're trying to get a minimum viable product out to market, meaning the minimum feature set that is going to provide value to someone who's willing to pay you for it, more than likely. Otherwise, you can call it beta or you can call it whatever you want. The idea there is to put something in somebody's hands that they're going to consume and use and maybe even pay you for. So you got to understand that we got to get to a product, but at the same time, we can't shortchange our time that we need in order to build what we in the product of the value and the value proposition that product needs in order for a customer to be happy with it or alive with it, and talking about life sciences and therapeutics and vaccines and cures and stuff like that. So, you have to put in the time. So that's why we talk about teams. That's why we talked about it last week about, how many founders is good. It's difficult for one person to do all this. It's easier for two people to do all this. I'm going to go work on the outside operational stuff. And Shelby, you're going to be working on the discovery side of things, so on and so forth. And then as you progress further and you get funding, obviously you put more people on the team. And the last thing I'll say about that is, agile and different types of process tools like agile and scrum and these different types of rapid deployment and development type solutions, very tried and true, decades old. Even agile is couple decades old now. They allow you to do rapid development with a process. So like if you do a 4-week sprint, that first week is about discovery, second week is about the R&D, third week is about development, fourth week is about testing, and then you roll it out. And then you do another sprint right after it. But you're breaking each one of those feature sets down in much smaller chunks so you can get them done in 1 week's worth of development, right? But everything's built into the process that way too. So it's everything is built in the process. Okay, so I want to move on. Is there any more questions? We just got to try to keep track of the time. Okay, so the tool that we're going to utilize, and we're going to send this out to you, is called the Idea Discovery Canvas. I'm sure a lot of people have heard, or maybe some of you have heard about the Lean Canvas. Some of y'all have heard maybe even about the business operations model canvas, and a lot of other different types of tools like this. We call them canvases because it's one page. It's broken up into blocks. Each block has its own section and its own importance. But because it's all built in this way in a canvas type fashion, each section, each grouping it means something to the one that it's attached to. And all of them together mean something to each other one individually. So the first one being problem, second one customer solution. You can get a good understanding of what those things, those are like the 3 legs of the stool that you're trying to build here, and they have to be lockstep with each other. And I'm gonna go through each one of these things. But this tool is also going to help you build the information you need, the data points you need to understand what your problem statement is, understand how to start segmenting your customers, understanding how to quantify and conceptualize in a kind of a paper form of what your solution is. And then going through each one of these sections one by one, you'll build the narrative you need to put into your pitch, right? Because when you're talking about the pitch and you're doing that initial hook and you're trying to get those people that are listening to you to understand where you're coming from, you have to tell them about the problem. You have to tell them about the customer. You have to tell them about the solution. But then they're going to want to know about the benefits, right? And they're going to want to know about the competitors, and they want to know how you're going to get that to market. And what are the obstacles? Well, y'all have a lot of one in this group because there's a lot of regulatory stuff. How much is it going to cost? What's the revenue? How are you going to make your money? And how are you going to continue to be successful? So we're going to walk through each one of these tonight, not in great detail. And then I want to send it out to y'all and let y'all digest it. I give this to every person that I mentor, every student, every existing business person, anyone going in entrepreneurship when they have an idea. This is the exercise we walk them through to get that idea out on paper. And the great thing about this is you can start building business plans from this, go to market strategies from this, financial documentation from this, and you can hand the single piece of paper to any team member that you want to help explain what you're trying to do, right? So as you build out a team, this becomes a living document that you share with your other teammates. And then as you move, what we were just talking about, as you iterate over time, guess what? These things update too, right? You start buying in much larger percentages from an offshore person, from an onshore company to an offshore company, just because the cost and the magnitude of how many units you're trying to order. That's great. Well, those are your channels and partners. So you need to update that. Did that cause any other disruptions in your logistical supply chain? Maybe so. Okay, let's update that. Are we in new markets now? Are there new obstacles, new regulatory situations, new laws? We're going into Europe and Germany, so on and so forth. There's all sorts of things that are obstacles. So you have to continuously update this document. So the first section is all about kind of market fit, right? We're going to talk about problem in detail tonight, and we'll talk about customer and solution in future sessions. But you first got to understand this. So when I break it down, I was like, look, don't even worry about the other 7 blocks in the idea discovery canvas. Let's focus specifically on these first 3. What is the problem you're trying to solve? And when I ask entrepreneurs what the problem is they're trying to solve, inevitably what we'll get is just a hodgepodge of everything that entrepreneur thought about as it relates to coming up with this concept. Their elevator pitch, the elevator would have to be 400 stories long for them to get it all out, right? Because they have so many things going on. That's a problem. I have been guilty of that and still guilty of that from a time to time, right? Everything's in my head. Think about that squirrely chaos section in the design, discovery phase. That's what's going on in entrepreneur's head. They are not, we are not, I am not, you are not going to be able to express what you're trying to do unless you get to a concise problem statement. In order to do that, you have to understand how to frame a problem. The best way to frame a problem is to do these simple things right here: the who's, the what's, the when's, the where's, and the how's. In there is also the why, right? So why is it happening? Well, it's happening to these people for this reason at this time in this place when they do this. So these are all kind of things as to answer to the problem. Then once you understand that, you can start to quantify and qualify rather the types of customers. Are these niche customers? Are these mass market customers? Are they customers with a certain ailment? Are they customers between the ages of 15 and 25 or 75 and 85? Are they man, female? There's all sorts of different demographics that we have to try to build upon when understanding what customers we're going to focus on. Remember the 2 things we said at the beginning: if you're building a product for one, you're building it for no one. If you're building a product for everyone, you're building it for no one, right? So you have to understand how to break down these customer segmentations. We're going to talk about a little bit about marketing segmentation tonight as well. And then solution, we'll go over solution a little bit down the road when we're talking about building out prototyping and everything else. But obviously the solution needs to respond to all of these things that are in the problem or idea area. And we call them problems, just so you know, we call them problems just because it's easy. It doesn't have to be a problem. It can be a new idea. I mean, the pool noodle is $1 billion business and it solved no problems. But it was actually a piece of extra material from the company, another company that the people own, that they just started cutting it up, putting it in different colors, and selling it to all of us when we go swimming, right? And so the pool noodle didn't fit any market as far as that go. It was a very disruptive technology. Everyone that I can see on your video, hold out a little C or a big C if you think the pool noodle was a big C or a little C. Big C. Yeah, I think it's a big C. Was it disruptive? Yeah. Did it change our lives? Yeah, actually, in many ways it did. I mean, we were able to float on this little piece of foam. I make fun of it, but I actually bring that and the super soaker water gun thing up every time I teach. The guy who invented the super soaker is actually a rocket freaking scientist. Worked for NASA for 3 decades. Has more patents probably than everybody in this room combined. He is a super, super intelligent guy. And no one had reinvented the water gun for centuries, decades. I mean, no one. He utilized his scientific mind to build a solution, an idea that wasn't a problem for really most. But then it became one of these things where we never realized how much those crappy little plastic water guns were a problem. But the fact of the matter is, you know, these things were completely disruptive of an entire industry. So again, that was a big C, right? But he had to understand what the problems were with the existing water guns. He also had to understand what the customers might want with those, and he had to build a solution that met those expectations. So a little bit crazy examples, but I think it's one that generally everyone knows about, and it's easy for everyone to kind of understand. Pool noodles and super soakers. Feel free to use those in your classes as well. Okay, so the next part is unique value proposition, unfair advantage, channels and partners, known obstacles. Unique value propositions, briefly, that's the benefits that a customer is going to glean, receive, get, however you want to think about it, from utilizing your product, derive from utilizing your product. So it's the customers and everything they want. If they have a million things that are thinking, oh, it's going to do this, and it's going to do this, and going to do this, you have too much. You need to break it down, right? We're going to solve smaller problems in order to solve bigger problems down the road. But they have to be unique. And what I mean by unique, it's not necessarily unique to one person. Your grouping of target customers has to have the same set of benefits. So you can't just make a arbitrary decision sitting in your garage as a team member of one and know what somebody's benefits are going to be from utilizing your solution, nor are you going to know if which one of those benefits are more towards the masses and less towards the niche, right? So you have to understand what the benefits are and how they are consistent from person to person. So if I was building a product for male or female between the age of 25 and 35, I would need to go out and talk to tens and 20s and hundreds of people in that segmentation to understand the total list of benefits that they might achieve. And then I got to look at the data points and see which ones are consistent, right? And which ones are said the most. And if I got 2 or 3 that are like 75% of the 100 people I said, so 75 people out of the 100 I interviewed said the same thing, I know that's going to be the big one, right? And I'm going to start building my problem statement and my solution statement around that, or updating it rather. Unfair advantages, what is my competition doing? Look, ideas are plentiful. Everyone has ideas, right? It's about execution that makes a difference between you and your competition. Certainly you can have groundbreaking stuff, get a patent on it, and be protected. Your moat is built around your castle for a certain number of years, although that whole world is changing. And we'll talk about that in a few weeks when we're talking about regulatory. But the fact is you can build a moat that successfully because you have proprietary technology. But in today's world, today's technological world, everything's open source. Everything is commodity based. Everyone's got phones. Everyone's got processing power greater than huge mainframes 30 years ago in the palm of their hand, right? So there's all these different things that have to be taken advantage of when you're taken into consideration when you're talking about your competition and how you're going to do things better, right? So you have to meet the expectations of the customers in a better way, executed better than your competition. So understanding what your unfair advantage is important as well. Channels and partners, pretty self-explanatory. This is, your marketing channels. How are you going to market and sell your product? It's also your sourcing and procurement, your inbound, your distribution, logistics, return logistics. If you're building a solution that's going to be deployed by another major manufacturer, a Cardinal, or someone, you're going to have to build your solution, have your logistics work with them, then have your logistics work with their customers, so on and so forth. So you have to understand who your partners are and your channels are, especially in health sciences, the medical devices and stuff like that, where generally you have another team selling those for you, and you're the creator of sorts. That happens a lot. Known obstacles, these are hurdles. They're the known knowns, the known unknowns, and the unknown unknowns, right? And the last one being the most difficult to kind of quantify or deal with. The known knowns are the regulatories. You have to go through a certain period of process, depending on what type device you are or what type of medicine you are, how many levels of trials you need to go through, so on and so forth, right? So these are known obstacles that you need to adjust to. Other ones are technology, ethics, finance, regulatory, geographic. And then there's the kind of things that aren't really here present of mine at this moment, but I know we're going to come, right? So I'm going to go ahead and list those down and start working for those. And the unknown unknowns, the ones you have no way of knowing and are beyond your control. If you have a tool like this and the ability to quickly look at your entire landscape of your product, you're going to be very well suited to deal with the unknown unknowns because you have a solution or process and the education and the skill set to not freak out, right? And to understand, here's how I'm going to fix this problem. I'm going to put it in here. I'm going to see how it affects every other block in the canvas. And then I'm going to make the change accordingly to get past this obstacle. Okay, hang on a second. I'm going to take a 1 minute. We're at halfway through right now. So let's do actually a 6-minute bio break. I'll finish the last of the content in the last 30 minutes. But so for the next 6 minutes, you have a bio break, and I'm going to put my mic on mute and fix one thing real quick, and then we'll be back. try this one more time. Okay, someone come off mute and tell me, because I'm having lots of difficulties. I want to continue going because we don't have a lot of time. So I can't hear anybody. Shelby, can you text me?
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
We can see your desktop.
Okay, can you see markets and customers?
No.
No.
All right. The whole, I mean, my technology just got so bad, I'm just going to show you through the PowerPoint application.
That's
Not even-
good.
Not even show you presentation mode.
That
Okay.
works.
Yeah, well, this is what entrepreneurs, we work on the fly. So sorry for that. Hope you did get a bio break in the extra 5 minutes. So I'm going to jump right back into it, and we'll stay on a little extra time tonight just for Q&A. All right, so let's talk about markets and customers. Market segmentation, and this is a conversation that again would go over several sessions. And so it's difficult to kind of break it down into just 5 or 10 minutes when you're talking about market segmentation, market identification. But we have talked about a lot of the basics of it already, right? It's understanding what segments of the market you're trying to attract and to work with. What types of products are you dealing with? Are they going to deal with everyday life and the demographics of different types of people and different ages and locations? Is it psychographic? Is it going to deal with someone's mentality? Is it going to be something that's going to enrich their lives? I mean, these are some examples. Behavioral and geographic, right? Does it have segmentation based on these variety of things? And you can break these down into much smaller increments of understanding segmentation. And also you can understand and break it down to what customers are by segmentation. We talked about mass. We talked about niche. There's certainly a lot of subgroups that go along with those, and some other larger groups in between those two. It's male, female, old, young, child, adult, dog, cat. These are all different types of segmentation of your customers. One thing that we will talk about as we progress into building out your deck is really, what's the addressable market? So these are another way of looking at the market. And it's very important to understand when you're going to talk to people that are going to potentially give you money, to not say, oh, this is a $36 trillion industry and we're going to go take 30% of it. No, you're not. Not anytime soon, and not not having a lot of money invested in you to do that. So the total addressable market is the healthcare industry. It's the it's the media industry. It's the entertainment industry. It's the automobile industry. These are the total addressable market for these major sectors. You can understand why no one's going to believe you if you say you're going to go get 20% of the total addressable market. So when you start to break down and really peel away the onion, the serviceable available market is the next segment down. That's the part of the TAM that you can effectively target. And that's you can deliver your services to this group of individuals with some ability, some reasonability. And then the next thing down is a serviceable obtainable market, which is that portion of the available market that you can actually capture. So when you're talking to someone, it's a $36 trillion industry, of which you can operate in a 10% space of that. So 10% of that 36 trillion. And then that you can capture with your technology and your team and your approach and your vision, 3% of that SAM, right? So it's a much smaller piece of a much larger pie, but it's more realistic. And these are the understandings that you have to have when you're building out your solution. Are you building it for a very small segment of people? And therefore, is your total addressable market very, very small? And if that's the case, how are you going to convince someone to fund you and give you money when they're expecting a certain level of return on investment? Right. And it's not that to say that you can't give them an ROI. It's just that you have to understand the level of expectation that you need to set to understand, let them understand what the addressable market is and how much market you're going to realistically capture. So these are good to understand kind of the market side of things. The biggest players in the market, though, are the customers. These are the ones that are going to, go to the register, the point of sale, and buy products from entrepreneurs. In your case, this might be something that is built through a hospital setting or a physician's group, or something else, and it's utilized in many different ways. And there's a difference between a customer and a consumer. A customer is generally one that's going to pay you for it and utilize it themselves. A consumer is someone that's generally not going to pay you for it, in this definition, but utilize it. So think about, again, we'll just use real world terms. Facebook makes billions of dollars off of us, but we don't pay Facebook a dime. They make billions of dollars off of revenue from revenue from ads and different things like that. Also selling your data, right? So we're not their customer, we're the consumer. Their customer is someone who's going to take that buyer behavior data and pump in their ads to you so they can then promote their products to you through the platform that is Facebook. You've probably heard of freemium versus premium. You're a consumer of something, an application, but you're also their customer from an expectation perspective. So you have power over that entrepreneur of saying, I like or don't like your product, but you're not paying for anything. It's kind of a freemium model. And then when it becomes a premium model, because it has value added services that are now able to be costed out and a price applied to for people to pay, that's also kind of how we move from just a general consumer of a product that you're not paying for to being an actual customer of that product and having a higher level of buyer power to affect how that product goes. Even to the point these days of how people think about that product. Influencers are both good and bad in our world, and they can make a product or break a product. They can make bad products good, very marketable, and can make good products bad in marketable terms too. So there's all sorts of aspects of understanding the customer and the consumer. I encourage y'all, because we don't have a lot of time on each one of these weeks, to take the topics that we talk about. I'm trying to give you some of the higher, more well-known industry terms for you to look at. Look at customers, look at consumers on Google or whatever your search engine of choice is, and get a better understanding of how to break down those things. We spend a lot of time in our entrepreneur education on customers, and we're going to talk about that more in next week's session. But we really, today we just wanted to kind of cover the basics. So we'll get deeper into that as we progress. Okay, let's talk about the problem. We have a problem and we're trying to find a solution for it. I mean, this image kind of illustrates, we're looking for the right puzzle piece to perfectly fit into the problem space. But if we don't know what the problem space is and how it's shaped, then we'll never be able to figure out how to fit that solution into that piece, that space, that gap, that market opportunity. So first we need to figure out the problem, right? We need to figure out what that is. And we do that by framing the problem. And the best way to do that is to kind of ask these 5 typical questions of, what, when, why, where, and how. So we'll kind of go through these today. So, the what is, what is the type of problem you're trying to solve? Is it technical? Is it non-technical? Is it physical? Is it non-physical? Is it a service? Other words, and is it a product? Is it a new idea or an existing, evolution of an existing product that somebody else maybe have? What are the kind of boundaries and barriers of what the product or the problem actually is? What is the solution? I mean, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? What is the idea, and how to encapsulate that in a kind of a general what term? Also, kind of identifying the market. Is it an existing market? Is it a new market? What similar products or service exist in that market? What types of potential customers may benefit from your concept, your problem? And then start defining the what. What is the difference in personal or native bias and thinking objectively about your concept? What are the underlying causes of the problem? And how far can you break it down, the problem, into individual chunks to get to a concise framing of that problem? So first step is all about the what. what are you trying to solve? What is a problem that you're trying to solve, or the idea that you're trying to bring to fruition? Next is the how. So, understanding, and these are from a problem perspective. This is not from a solution perspective. It's like, what is the problem and what is the opportunity? Not necessarily what solution will fit there, but what is the problem that needs a solution? So I want to make sure we're talking about problem and not solution here. Same goes with how. Ask yourself, why do I or others have this problem? I like using the 5 whys. I use it on myself. I use it when I'm interviewing other people, and it's pretty simple. When I ask someone a question about, why does why do they have this problem? And they give me an answer. And then I'm like a 3-year-old child. I'll say, well, why? And then they'll tell me more. And then I'll say, okay, well, why? And then they'll tell me more. And I'll say, okay, why? And then, each level I'm asking the word why, usually the word why, but typically what I'm asking for is more detail, and I'm driving down, peeling away the onion, whatever analogy you want to think about it. But I'm using the 3-year-old model of asking why to continue to delve down into the problem, so I understand exactly what's causing the problem. What are the facets? What are the things, the contributors that are causing this problem? And I have to understand how. So I have to gather information. I have to do my own research. You have to look at your findings and break those problems into the symptoms and the causes, making sure, we talk about this a lot, is understanding what is the problem and what is the source of the problem, and what are you trying to solve? Are you trying to solve the problem because you can't solve the solution, the source of the problem? Are you going to solve the problem by curing the source of the problem? And that's a big thing, right? So you have to understand, and you have to keep asking the questions. You keep asking the five whys, because you have to make sure that you've gone down to the level of detail enough where you truly understand, yes, this is the source of the problem. This is the what and the why, and what and the how. And I need to figure out the other aspects of that in order to make sure that I have a concise problem statement. All right. So now it's the how. It's the oh my God, I repeated that one thing. So who, what, where, why? Identify, try to quantify the problem's impact if not solved. Identify possible benefits of solving the problem before committing to the problem. Address the problem solution of digging deeper, and just your goals. So going back and understanding how the problem has affected your base assumption that you made before you started walking into this. And then, continue asking, when does this happen, at a certain time in a certain place? Is it a certain geographic area? Is it a certain condition that occurs? You need to ask yourself all these simple questions that give you very, detailed answers in order to properly frame the problem. Now, if you did all this and you walk through each one of these things, you kind of broke it down, you should have a lot of information sitting at your fingertips as to what you then need to do in order to build a proper problem framed statement, right? Something that you can say is concise, that answers these questions. And I have an example for you here. So the Townsville General Hospital, which is the where, operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. As such, patient needs must be addressed all around the clock. For the overnight shift, which is the when, there are currently no cardiology technologists scheduled. That's the what, that's the need, which can create issues for emergency staff. That's the who. Some patients wait for hours or more for medical laboratory assistant to administer an electrocardiogram, a task better suited for cardiology technologists to perform and interpret. The result in poor patient care and worse health outcomes is the why. That's what happens. And the customer should always have a cardiology technologist available, even if they are only on call for the overnight shift. And that's how you're going to solve the problem. So, I mean, it's an example of, breaking these things down into enough chunks where you can form a problem statement that's properly framed in order to say, yes, this is the problem that we're going to try to solve. This is the problem that I'm going to go talk to 100 potential customers about and validate my findings in this regard. And when I start to see a trend of people telling me something different, I evolve the problem statement and then start working with those new batch of individuals that I'm talking to validate that. And if I keep going all in different directions, then I know there's a problem in my problem statement. If I get all the feedback in the world, but all of it's individualized and unique, then I'm not really anywhere closer to understanding what the problem is for anybody other than myself. But if I get 10 out of 20 or 5 out of 20, and then another 5 or 6 out of the next 30, and another 10 or 12 out of the next 30, and out of 100 people that I've talked to, my problem pretty much relates to 30% of those, I'm off to the races. I'm going to start building out my customer profiles and personas based on the people that I talked to and my information that I gathered and the research that I put together and everything I would do and observed and everything else. I'm going to start putting together what I feel is the typical market for the typical customer, and then start building out my solution in a prototype phase, all because I validated my problem statement. But I wasn't able to validate my problem statement if I wasn't able to explain it to those people that I'm talking to. So you can see the logic and the importance of getting down to a very concise, well framed out problem statement. And that's going to help us move forward with this process. Okay, your homework is going to be building a problem statement. We're going to give you access to this deck and some more information. Typically we have it online, but some of those things have failed tonight. We'll fix that too. So we're going to send out some more information. We'll send out this deck for you to have it. The sessions will be recorded and uploaded later, so you can actually go back and revisit what has been said and what has been asked and what has been answered. And then we can kind of move through this. We'll have office hours tomorrow. So I suggest you kind of digest what we've talked about tonight, start framing. I'd start communicating with my teammates, certainly figuring a way to communicate with them, whatever tools we're going to utilize. Start communicating with them, start answering these questions, start breaking down the general problem that you think your solution is going to be fixing, and get to a problem statement. And then if you digest that tonight, start talking about the basics with your teammates, and then come into office hours tomorrow with the questions that you have. We'll help you with these problem statements. We'll help you kind of frame these things out. So don't worry about that. And then you'll have until the next session actually to come up with your team's problem statement. But that will be something we address very early on in the next session, just to kind of go over those to make sure that we can move forward and we don't have anything in between, standing in front of us of moving forward into the customer phase and the solution phase. So spend the time that you need understanding this, ask us questions, get on office hours, utilize the resources, spend time with your team over the next week, come up with that problem statement, and let's get it locked in before our next session. So that's your homework. But before I open it up to question and answer, at this point, I also wanted to give you exposure to our pitch deck that we're going to have at the end of that you're going to utilize through this process, and be the basis for what you're pitching at the end of this program. So I'll open it up to questions while I'm multitasking, looking for this other deck. Remember to take yourself off mute. Okay. Okay. All right. So someone take yourself off mute and tell me, yes, you see the thing that says pitch template on it.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. So what I wanted to go over tonight is kind of taking what we've talked about tonight and then showing you what that means, because we talked about it very early on, what that's going to mean when you're building out your narrative and building out your pitch for that 9th week kind of, Shark Tank kind of paneled investor competition or pitch competition that we're going to have at the end in front of your other peers and other people. So this is the pitch deck that we give out as an example to individuals, entrepreneurs, when they're creating their narrative, their pitch. And you'll see early on that it's based on the idea discovery canvas, and it's included in the pitch deck, and we'll make this available to you as well. One thing that I want to illustrate very early on is the other deck, like it or love it, or not like it, has a lot of graphical elements. The ones I've been utilizing have imagery and pictures and everything else. And that's an important part of your pitch to grab people's attention. You definitely want to make it look good, look pretty, look sophisticated, look professional, look scientific, however you want to do it. But in this deck, I've taken out all of that fluff, as important as it is, because I don't want to bias you anyway on what you may do from a design perspective. So they're just gonna be these generic screens. But these next 15, 16 slides, 18 slides, we're going to go through really, really quickly. I'm not going to spend time on hardly any of them, are really important. And we're going to spend a few weeks on this towards the tail end. So today it's about giving you an exposure. If you would like to go ahead and digest it and start looking into it, you'll find a lot of commonalities between the idea discovery canvas and this deck. So that will help. All right. So as I said, it's based on the idea discovery canvas, but this deck has every piece in it that you would need for virtually any presentation that you would make about your idea. Whether you're talking about your own internal teams and you're trying to get them to have an understanding of your focus and your goal around your products or your problem and solution, your customer, or what have you, and you leave some of the other stuff out, that's great. This deck is already available for you. If you're pitching to an investor, they're going to want to see most of what is in this deck. If you're pitching to customers, you're going to pitch them the highlights, the problem, the solution, and especially the solution, and you know, all the other aspects that they need to buy the product. So what this deck is kind of an all-encompassing, all-up deck that allows you to build into a narrative of all the information you need to pitch this to pretty much any audience you could imagine. Also based on the idea discovery canvas. So as you're building out the discovery canvas, as we mentioned earlier, you're collecting the information to fill out these different slides, and you'll see them by title. So problem. So once we've come up with the pain point, the problem statement, we can put that here directly and talk about our problem. The market and customer. What does our market look like? What are our customers like? How do we quantify the pain? How bad does the problem hurt to our customers that they're going to just eat our solution up? So the market and the customers. What our solution is in particular, you know, what are the unique value proposition, the benefits, what are our competitive and unfair advantages, what's our go-to-market strategy? That's not in the idea discovery canvas in particular or specifically, but as you build out the entire canvas, these are the things you're going to need to inform your go-to-market strategy. So your business model, how you're going to make money, what is it going to take to get to the market that you need to get to. How much progress have you made? I mean, have you done trials yet? Have you done in vitro? Have you done these different things? Where are you in your process? Those all need to be heralded. If you've made it through the first process and you're moving into you know, animal trials or human trials, I mean, these are different things that you need to tout as your progress, because investors want to see what you've done with very little, so they can understand what you possibly can do with a lot, right? So if you've gotten away with, you know, $20,000 and gotten through your first year and have a product in the market and it's actually generating a little bit of revenue, they're going to immediately wonder, well, what happens if I give you $200,000 or if I give you $2 million? What's that mean to me as an investor? Well, this progress kind of helps illustrate what that can mean. Ask, you know, what we're going to try to get to this point through this process, although we're not going to spend a lot of time breaking down each one of your businesses from a cost perspective. So your ask might not be in your final presentation. But if we do get to that point and get a good understanding of what maybe the next 3 years look like in clinical trials, and that's $3 million for each phase or $1 million for each phase, that would be your ask. That's what you're going to be asking investors to do at the end. Your team, it's always great to talk about your team, the who's and the what's and what they did, and what their pedigree is. It's going to validate, especially in our area of tech transfer and IP like this, you need to be validated based on credentials. So your CV is very important. Your general background of what you work in the area of expertise is very important. The advisors that you might put on there, the mentors you might put on here on your team, the subject matter experts are all going to add credibility and validity to what you're doing and the problem and solution. If you get to the end and you don't kind of, you know, paint a picture of how powerful your team is and how smart your team is, people are going to ask that and wonder if it's just you, and they're not going to give you a lot of money for that or any, because they're not going to believe that you can do this on your own, because it's very hard to do. So the thank you, this is not the end of my presentation. This is actually you saying thank you for their time. And then these last few tips are just kind of general pro tips. You know, at the end, don't have a question slide that just says questions. Put up your most important slide again that you want to leave them with. Don't just lay the word be questions over your shoulder as you're answering the questions. Put up a slide that's the most important. Maybe it's how much money you can make, just to keep putting it in investor's face of, hey, this is what you'll get if you invest in us. So don't waste that. Use imagery. You've noticed I've used a lot of imagery in this presentation that I make. I think it breaks things up. It allows people to kind of not just look at all the words and bullets and everything else, but truly understand and see things. And it's best if you use images. I don't know if you've noticed this, but every time I make a presentation update, I put in images that would make most sense to you, my audience. So I look for scientific type things. I look for entrepreneurial type things. I look for group settings and different things, because I'm building a movie, a play, a narrative for my audience that I want them fully engrossed in. If I can visually engross them into my presentation because of the imagery that I'm using, that's going to be all the better for me in the end. And then you got to get real OCD. You can read through these over and over. But the last thing is probably the most important thing is practice, practice, practice. We're going to give you 2 weeks before the final presentation, but don't wait until those sessions just to give us your pitch, just so we can give you critiques. You're going to have to give that pitch over and over and over again, several times and several practice iterations on your own, in order to make sure that you've got the quality that you want in your presentation when it's all said and done. You're presenting to the final judges. So we'll send this deck out. As you can see, it's directly related to the information that we're going to try to gather, starting off with the problem statement, and we'll drop that in here when it's right and it's properly framed next week, before we move into the market discovery and solution conceptualizations phases. So I do apologize for the technical difficulties tonight. Last week, I should have known everything went perfect first time. And this week, with snow and CBU has had internet outages all week, we have just been behind the gun. So I apologize. I think we made the best of it as we possibly could. It's 7:30, but I'm certainly happy to wait around and answer anybody's questions for as long as you need. So I'm going to stop talking and just let anybody ask questions if they have.
So do we need to reach out to like the team leaders or like the professors and researchers, like their different teams? Or is someone going to reach out to us type thing with that Google Doc?
I mean, my response would be it's whoever can get to it first reaches out to the rest of them. Obviously, you have a team leader and someone that's going to be in some of y'all's teams that represent the technology. Definitely good to get in touch with that person and kind of get a better understanding. But someone's got to take the first step. And so if you got everybody's email address because of that spreadsheet, I'd go ahead and reach out to anyone. So first come, first serve, unless, Ryan, you had something much more specific on what they should do.
No, I think that's exactly it. But I would also make sure you reach out to the faculty mentors to make sure you have a firm grasp of what the technology is and sort of what the market could be. So that would be the first step, is just get a group email going with everybody and get on the same page on when you guys could sit down and maybe talk to the mentor via Zoom or via email, something like that.
Okay, I'm not familiar with everybody's name, so I just didn't know like who the mentors were in each group type thing. So that's what I was asking.
Yeah, and I think, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but during office hours, we have the ability to do breakout sessions. So if the entire team wants to show up to an office hour tomorrow, you guys could all get together and discuss how you want to move forward.
Yeah.
And if you have any issues with it, I'm more than happy to help.
Yeah, we'll do breakout rooms if the whole team is there, and we'll cover that tomorrow.
And I think Shelby put on the messages that she's going to have the link for office hours as soon as this ends, so you guys can sign up for it.
Any other questions?
So how much is the time allocated for this speech presentation? Is it 15 minutes or 30?
Ryan, go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, so we haven't officially decided yet, but it's probably going to be around between 8 and 10 minutes is going to be the pitch, and then you're going to have about 5 minutes for questions and answers.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
This is Brad. I was just going to ask if the mentors' emails for each IP are going to be attached to the Google Sheet or Shelby's email or some form of fashion.
I can send the mentors' email addresses out to everyone who's participating. I just want to make sure, did everyone get my email reminding them of tonight's session from the BioTN email? Did everyone get that? Okay, then look for another email right after tonight's session, and I'll have all the mentors' names and email addresses attached. And what team they're mentoring.
I think I saw Shelby's email. I didn't see one from you, Ryan.
You sent one on Tuesday around 8 o'clock.
Let's see.
Oh, was it from Cypreneur? Not your email, Ryan, but from.
Yeah, Scipreneur@biotn.org.
Okay, yeah, got that one. Thanks.
Okay, good. Yep. Or Scipreneur@biotn.org. Yeah.
Okay, other questions? I'm collecting all the documents right now, putting those up there on a Google Drive, and we'll send y'all access to that. Here shortly.
Yeah, I was curious, who are the office hours with specifically? Is it each mentor? Is it you guys? Is it
Tomorrow, most weeks it's going to be Shelby and I, and then we'll have guests also join us when they're the day after their guest speaking. No, I mean, as far as your, leader goes related to your technology, you go directly to them and try to set up time with them to get a better understanding of what you need to.
Ryan, I have a question.
Yeah.
So the mail ID which you were talking about, the only mail probably I'm getting is from cbu.edu. Is there any other mail you are sending out?
Yeah, so you should be receiving one from Scipreneur@biotn.org.
No, so then I haven't received any mail from that email address which you just said.
Let me check one thing. Let's see. Which team were you on again? Do you remember?
Team 2, sorry, I was on mute.
Let's see. So your email was pankaj.ghate@stjude.org.
Yes, that's correct.
So I'll send another one later tonight. It looks like you were on the list.
Mhm.
So if for some reason you don't see an email from me later tonight,
Okay.
go ahead and reach back out to me. I'll type in my personal email address in the chat box.
Sure.
And just send me an email saying you didn't receive it, and I'll send you a personal message with it.
Other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much. We're going to be sending more information in email. The material we discussed tonight, the sign-up sheet, that's all going to come after this meeting. So if we don't have anything else to discuss or any other questions, Ryan, Erica, if you didn't have anything to add, I think we can conclude tonight's session. And you can look at the schedule for the Sympathy Challenge to know what we're going to do next week. Remember, your homework is to work on a problem statement, a very concise one. And we'll work on that as much as you need to between now and then, certainly office hours tomorrow. If you want to send us problem statements to check over, Shelby and I, we can do that, and we'll send you back our feedback in the email. That's also a good opportunity, or just, give us a buzz and we'll work with you any way we can to get you down the road. So expect some more information from us after the session. Other than that, I thank everybody for their time, and looking forward to talking to y'all soon.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you.